A hallucination rate below 0.1%. That's not a typo. OpenAI's next model hallucinates less than 1 in 1,000 responses, and it launches tomorrow. This is GPT-6, codename Spud. What a name. And it changes everything we thought we knew about what these models can do. Today, we're breaking down every confirmed detail before Monday's launch, the architecture, the benchmarks, the pricing, the strategy, and why OpenAI killed Sora to make this happen. If you haven't checked out my Sora video yet, I'll put that in the above and below descriptions. Let me set the scene. March 24th, 2026, OpenAI completes pre-training on a model they've been internally calling Spud. 2 weeks later, April the 7th, Sam Altman confirms to the world that it launches globally on April the 14th, tomorrow. And here's what Altman said about it. He called it, and I quote, a very strong model that could really accelerate the economy. Now, Sam Altman says a lot of things, but Greg Brockman, who's been relatively quiet since coming back to OpenAI, went on a podcast and independently confirmed that pre-training was complete and the benchmarks were, well, unprecedented. So let's talk about those benchmarks because they're not just good, they are generational. That's the standard coding benchmark. Spud scores above 95%. That's near human performance on code generation. Math reasoning, roughly 85%, and that's the one I think changed the game for agents. Task completion went from 62% on GPT 5.4 to 87% for Spud. I mean, come on, that's not incremental improvement. That's a 40% jump across coding, reasoning, and agent tasks. Let that sink in. 40% over the previous best model. But the number that matters most, the hallucination rate, below 0.1%. Do you understand what that even means? Every model before this has had a massive trust problem. You could use GPT-4, GPT-5, whatever, but you always had to double check absolutely everything. You couldn't deploy it to medicine, you couldn't trust it to legal, financial analysis, forget it, because it would just confidently make things up for you, and we all know this, so hopefully this will change that. At 0.1% hallucination, that changes. That's reliable enough for clinical decision support, for document review, for financial compliance. We're talking about unlocking markets worth trillions of dollars. Not because the model got slightly better at writing emails, but because it finally crossed the trust threshold. And whether they call it GPT 5.5 or GPT-6 apparently depends on the magnitude of the benchmark leap, because I think we know which way they're going. A quick one before we dive deeper. If you're getting value from this, do me a huge favour, hit that subscribe button and the bell notifications. I'm a small channel breaking AI news before the mainstream media picks it up. Every subscription generally helps me do this. Alright, let's get back into it. So everyone's going to focus on benchmark numbers. The headings will be GPT-6 scores 95% on coding, and yeah, that's impressive. But the real story, the one that I think matters way more in the long term, is the architecture underneath those numbers. Spud introduces something called two-tier inference. And if you've ever read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking, Fast and Slow, this will sound familiar, because OpenAI has essentially built the framework into an AI model. System 1 is a fast, intuitive layer. It handles conversational replies, simple queries, pattern-matched tasks, and latency. Low compute costs is the model on autopilot, quick, efficient, good enough for most things. System 2 is a slow, deliberate layer. This is where the model actually thinks. Logic verification, multi-step deduction, mathematical proof, complex reasoning chains. When you ask it to do something hard, the model dynamically routes the system 2, and it takes more time, more compute to get it right. Here's the thing though, this isn't just nice architectural features, this is how you get a 40% better performance without 40% higher costs. And if you haven't checked out my OpenAI burning through billions and billions of dollars video, I will put that above and below. So this is obviously their kind of solution to kind of solving that massive problem they've got at the minute. Think about it. Right now, every query to language model costs roughly the same amount of compute, whether you're asking it to write a haiku or prove a mathematical theorem. That is insane. That's like charging the same price for Google search and a full data center simulation. With System 1 and System 2, Spud allocates resources dynamically. Simple question, System 1 handles it for fast and cheap. Hard problem, route to System 2. Slower, more expensive, but dramatically more accurate. This is how you scale AI to billions of users without bankrupting yourself on inference costs. I don't think people realise how big this architectural shift is. This is not just about Spud, and that makes me laugh every time I say it. This is the template for every frontier model going forward. The era of one-size-fits-all inference is over, and honestly, it should have been done over a year ago. Alright, so we've covered what Spud can do. Now let's talk about what OpenAI is doing with it, because the strategic moves here are fascinating. First, and this one is wild, OpenAI killed Sora to make this happen. Sora, their video generation model, the thing everyone was losing their minds over a year ago, gone. Not shelved, not deprioritized, killed. They freed up GPU resources and redirected them entirely to Spud's training and inference infrastructure. What did this tell you? It tells you that OpenAI has decided explicitly that general intelligence matters more than creative tools. Video generation can wait. Reliable reasoning cannot. That's a massive strategic signal. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're going all in on a model that can actually think. Second, Spud will be the backbone of what OpenAI is calling unified super app. One inference that can browse the web, write and execute code, and hold natural conversations. Not 3 different tools, not a chatbot and a coding assistant and a web browser. One app, one model, everything. And here's where the pricing gets really interesting. $2.50 per million input tokens, $12 per million output tokens. You know what that is? That's flat compared to GPT 5.4. Same price, 40% better performance. That's not just competitive pricing. That's OpenAI saying to every developer considering Anthropic or Google, don't even think about it. By holding prices flat while dramatically improving capability, they're making the switching costs calculation impossible to justify. Why would you migrate to Claude or Gemini when you're getting 40% more for the same money? And then there's the Polymarket angle. Before the official confirmation, prediction markets had this at 78% probable by the end of April. The information was leaked for weeks, the market knew, and yet the official announcement still moved markets. That tells you something about the gap between probably happening and definitely happening in AI. Alright, here's my contrarian take this week, and I know this might be unpopular given all the hype. Everyone is treating GPT-6 as the biggest model release since GPT-4, and they're right, but here's what I think everyone's missing. This might be the last model release that matters in this way. Think about it. The System 1 and System 2 architecture means future improvements will be about routing orchestration, not the raw model scale. The arms race is shifting. It's no longer who's the biggest model, it's who's the smartest inference. At sub 0.1% hallucination and 87% agent task completion, we're approaching diminishing returns on the metrics that actually matter for production use. The gap between GPT-6 and GPT-7 will be much harder to feel than the gap between GPT-4 and GPT-6. And flat pricing confirms it. The model layer is being commoditized. The margin is moving to the product experience, to the ecosystem, to the application layer. Nobody gets excited about PostgreSQL releases, right? The model is becoming infrastructure. So enjoy the launch on Monday. It's deserved. But I think the era of model release as a major event is ending. The future of AI competition is about products, agents, and ecosystems, not benchmark charts. Quick hits before we close. OpenAI Safety Fellowship applications are now open with a May the 3rd deadline. Timed perfectly with GPT-6 launch. This is both genuine investment in alignment research and very smart PR move to front-run the inevitable safety criticisms that come with releasing the most capable model in history. Prediction markets are becoming genuinely useful for tracking AI releases. Polymarkets had GPT-6 at 70% before the confirmation. This is worth bookmarking as a research tool. These markets are pricing in insider signals and leaks weeks before the official announcements. So here's where we stand. Tomorrow, OpenAI launches the most significant model since GPT-4. Sub 0.1% hallucinations, 85% agent task completion, a dual inference architecture that fundamentally changes how these models allocate compute, and all of it is flat pricing. The question isn't whether GPT-6 is impressive, it is. The question is what you're going to build with it. Because the gap between people who are ready for Monday and the people who aren't are going to get very wide, very fast. I'll follow up this video with another hands-on with Spud when it's available. Real tests, real workflows, real results. You'll definitely want to see that. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.